AITA for refusing to switch my vacation dates because my coworker has kids. I never thought a simple vacation request would turn into workplace drama, but here I am, dealing with passive-aggressive comments and cold shoulders because I dared to keep the time off I requested months in advance. For context, I work in a mid-sized office with a fairly straightforward vacation request system. The rule is simple: request your time off, get it approved, and that's that. I put in my request for a specific week nearly 6 months ago. I had been planning a trip for a while, researching flights, accommodations, and everything in between. Once my request was officially approved by our manager, I went ahead and booked everything: non-refundable flights, hotel stays, and even some excursions I had been looking forward to for ages. It was all set. I was counting down the days, excited for a well-earned break. Then last week, my coworker Lisa approached me. Lisa and I have always been friendly at work. We chat in the break room, make small talk about our weekends, and occasionally help each other out on projects. She's been with the company a bit longer than I have and is well liked around the office. Lisa has kids, and while I don't, I understand that being a working parent comes with its own set of challenges. I try to be accommodating whenever I can, switching shifts when emergencies come up, covering for people when they need to leave early, things like that. She came up to my desk and asked if I had a moment to talk. I assumed it was about work, but instead, she told me she had just realized her kid's school break fell during the same week as my vacation. She said she really wanted to take them on a trip and asked if I'd be willing to swap my vacation for another time so she could have that week instead. I was caught off guard. It wasn't just some casual request where I could easily switch things around. I had already booked my trip, and the thought of rescheduling everything, paying extra fees, losing out on some non-refundable reservations, and reworking my entire plan, wasn't even an option for me. I told her as kindly as I could that I was sorry, but I had already made all the arrangements and couldn't change them. Lisa's expression immediately shifted. It wasn't outright anger, but there was a definite shift in her tone. She sighed and said, "It must be nice to have so much flexibility," in a way that made it clear she wasn't just making an observation, she was implying that because I don't have kids, my plans weren't as important. That rubbed me the wrong way. I have no problem with parents needing accommodations when possible, but I don't think that automatically means my time is any less valuable just because I don't have children. I told her, just because I don't have kids doesn't mean my time off is any less important. She didn't say anything after that, but the tension was palpable. She walked away without another word, and I figured that was the end of it. Except it wasn't. Over the next few days, I started noticing small changes in the way Lisa was acting toward me. She was colder than usual, barely acknowledging me in meetings or in passing. Normally, we would exchange small talk during breaks, but now she avoided me entirely. I overheard her talking to another coworker about how hard it is for working parents to get any consideration and how some people just don't understand what it's like to have responsibilities beyond themselves. She didn't say my name, but it was obvious who she was referring to. Then another coworker, someone I've always gotten along with, casually mentioned that I could have been more understanding. When I asked what they meant, they said, "Well, Lisa just really wanted to take her kids on a trip, and you already get to travel whenever you want. She doesn't have that kind of flexibility." That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just Lisa being upset, she was talking to people about it, framing it in a way that made it seem like I was selfish for not giving up my plans. But what was I supposed to do? I followed the rules. I put in my request early, got it approved, and made my arrangements. If the roles were reversed and I had waited until the last minute and found out someone else already had the time off, I wouldn't expect them to change everything for me. I get that parents have additional challenges when it comes to planning vacations, but I don't think that means those without kids should always be the ones to compromise. My vacation is important to me, even if it doesn't involve taking care of children. Now I'm stuck in this weird situation where I feel like I'm being judged just for keeping the plans I made months ago. I don't think I did anything wrong, but the way people are acting makes me wonder if I should have handled it differently. Am I really the bad guy here? Update 1. I thought the worst had passed. The tension in the office was still there, but I figured it would eventually die down. Lisa was still being cold toward me, but I wasn't going to grovel or feel guilty for keeping the vacation I had rightfully requested. People would move on, and this would be just another minor workplace spat that faded into irrelevance. That's what I thought, at least. Then a few days later, I opened my email and saw a message from HR with the subject line, "Discrepancy in your vacation request." My stomach tightened before I even clicked on it. The email was short and professional, stating that there was an issue with my time off request and that I needed to clarify which week I was actually taking off. That made no sense. There shouldn't have been any issue. My request had been approved months ago, and my manager had already reinstated it after that whole fiasco with Lisa. Feeling uneasy, I opened our shared company calendar where all approved vacations were listed. My eyes scanned the screen, searching for my name, and then my breath caught. My approved vacation week was gone. Just gone. Instead, there was a new pending request under my name, for an entirely different week. A week I had never chosen. My heart dropped. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had gone into the system and manually changed my request. The implications hit me immediately. This wasn't just passive-aggressive hostility or office gossip. Someone had actively tampered with my records, and considering how vacation approvals worked in our system, only a manager or senior staff member would have had the ability to do that. The realization sent a surge of anger through me, but I forced myself to stay level-headed. Storming into HR or blasting out an accusatory email wouldn't help. I needed to go straight to the source. I got up, walked directly to my manager's office, and asked if he had a minute. He looked up from his desk, seeming mildly surprised but not alarmed, so I figured he hadn't seen the email yet. I told him there was an issue with my vacation request. He frowned and pulled up the system. As he scrolled through the request history, his expression darkened. He saw exactly what I saw: someone had gone in and manually altered my approved time off. The change wasn't an automatic system glitch. It was deliberate. I could see the moment it clicked for him that this was serious. He exhaled sharply and muttered that this wasn't supposed to happen. I asked who had the ability to make these kinds of changes, and he confirmed what I already knew: only managers and senior staff could adjust approved requests. That narrowed it down significantly. I wasn't going to dance around the obvious, so I asked outright if Lisa had said anything about my vacation. That's when my manager hesitated. A brief flicker of discomfort crossed his face before he admitted, "I was going to talk to you about that. She mentioned you might be open to switching weeks, so I assumed it was a mistake." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at him, trying to process what I had just heard. Lisa had gone to my manager and told him I was open to changing my vacation, something I had explicitly refused to do, and instead of verifying with me, he just assumed it was true and let it happen. I felt my jaw tighten as I told him point blank that I never agreed to change my vacation and had no idea how my request was altered. My voice was calm, but inside, I was seething. He looked genuinely flustered now, clicking back through the system as if he could undo what had already been done. After a moment, he said he would reinstate my original request immediately and promised to look into who had made the change. I thanked him, but I already knew. Lisa had done this. Whether she had logged in herself or convinced someone else to do it, she was the only one with a reason to tamper with my vacation request. And now she was trying to frame it as some kind of misunderstanding, something that my manager had just assumed was an error. This wasn't just frustration over not getting her way. This was calculated. She had already started twisting the story to make it seem like I was the unreasonable one, like I had agreed to something and then gone back on my word. I could already imagine her telling people that she thought I had been fine with switching, that it must have just been a clerical error, that she was just trying to clear things up. I wasn't about to let it slide, but I also knew I had to be careful. She was already spinning the narrative against me. Update 2. Just when I thought things couldn't get more ridiculous, I got an email that made my blood boil. It was from HR, requesting a meeting. The wording was vague, something about discussing recent workplace concerns and ensuring a positive team dynamic. I knew immediately this had Lisa's fingerprints all over it. There was no way this was a coincidence. She had already tried to manipulate my vacation request behind the scenes, and when that didn't work, she had gone straight to HR. I walked into the HR office, keeping my expression neutral even as frustration bubbled beneath the surface. The HR rep, a polished professional with the kind of carefully practiced, non-threatening smile that made it clear they dealt with office drama for a living, gestured for me to sit. They started with pleasantries, a bit of small talk, but it didn't take long to get to the point. Apparently, an anonymous complaint had been filed against me for being uncooperative and dismissive of team needs. I nearly laughed. It was so predictable, so textbook, that it almost didn't surprise me. Lisa had realized she couldn't force me to give up my vacation through guilt or manipulation, so now she was trying to make it look like I was the one causing problems. It was petty, it was desperate, and it was infuriating. The HR rep was professional, keeping their tone neutral, but their questions made it obvious that they had already heard a version of events before I even walked in. They wanted to know if there was any reason I was refusing to work collaboratively with my coworkers. If I felt there was any workplace tension that needed to be addressed. If there had been any miscommunication that led to my unwillingness to compromise. I kept my voice even, measured, controlled. I explained everything, how I had put in my vacation request months ago, how it had been approved, how Lisa had asked me to switch weeks and I had politely told her no. How she had tried to guilt-trip me, implying my time off was less important because I don't have kids. How my vacation request had mysteriously been altered in the system without my consent. How my manager had assumed it was a mistake because Lisa had implied I was open to switching, despite me making it abundantly clear that I wasn't. The HR rep nodded along, taking notes, listening attentively. But there was something in their expression, something in the careful way they framed their responses, that made it obvious this wasn't the first version of the story they had heard. Lisa had already been here. She had already laid the groundwork. And I had no doubt her version of events made her look like the reasonable one while I was painted as difficult and unyielding. Then, just as I thought the meeting was wrapping up, the HR rep glanced down at their notes and casually mentioned something that made my stomach drop. It seems there was also a concern about your attitude towards working parents. That was when I realized Lisa had taken this to a whole new level. She wasn't just complaining about me to coworkers anymore. She wasn't just painting me as inflexible. She was actively framing me as someone who was anti-working parent. It was such an underhanded, insidious move that for a moment, I couldn't even process it. This wasn't about the vacation anymore. This wasn't just about her getting what she wanted. This was an attack on my character. She had taken a completely mundane workplace disagreement and twisted it into a narrative. A dangerous one. One that could easily spiral out of control. She knew exactly what she was doing, positioning herself as the struggling, overworked mother just trying to do the best for her kids, while I was the uncooperative, selfish coworker refusing to be a team player. She was playing into a perception that already existed in so many workplaces, the idea that people without children have it easier, that their time is less valuable, that they should automatically defer to those with families because they don't have real responsibilities. I forced myself to stay calm, but inside, I was furious. I had spent years being the opposite of what she was accusing me of. I had covered for coworkers with kids when they had to leave early. I had taken on extra work so parents on my team could make it to school events. I had never complained, never asked for anything in return, because I understood that being a working parent was hard. And yet, none of that mattered now. Because Lisa was playing a different game. And the worst part? It wasn't even about me. She wasn't doing this because she actually thought I had something against working parents. She was doing this because she wanted something and I hadn't given it to her. She didn't get what she wanted, so now she was painting me as the villain. I clenched my jaw and took a deep breath before calmly explaining that I had never had an issue working with parents, that I had always been accommodating in the past, that there was absolutely no basis for what Lisa was implying. And then I backed it up with proof. I pulled up emails showing when my vacation had been approved months ago. I referenced instances where I had covered for coworkers with kids, where I had adjusted my schedule for them. I pointed out that Lisa's complaints only started after I refused to switch my vacation. The HR rep listened, nodding, taking notes. When I was done, they gave me the standard corporate response, that they would review the situation, that they would speak with all parties involved, that they would ensure a fair resolution. I knew what that meant. It meant they weren't going to do anything. Unless this escalated further, unless it turned into something bigger, HR wasn't going to step in. They weren't going to reprimand Lisa for lying. They weren't going to call her out for manipulating the system. They weren't going to clear my name. They were going to wait. And I knew exactly what that meant for me. Lisa had already started the narrative. And now, unless I handled this carefully, that narrative was going to spread. HR said they would review the situation, but I knew that was just corporate speak for, we're not doing anything unless this escalates further. Update 3. I knew Lisa wasn't going to stop. People like her never do. She had already tried to guilt-trip me, manipulate my manager, and even weaponize HR against me. When none of that worked, I figured she'd double down in some new, underhanded way. She had already started a narrative, painting herself as the poor, overworked mother and me as the inflexible coworker unwilling to make sacrifices for the greater good of the team. I knew she would keep pushing that storyline, keep finding little ways to turn people against me. What I didn't expect was for karma to hit her harder than I ever could have planned. It all unraveled about a week later when our manager called for an all-hands meeting. The email had gone out the night before with an urgent subject line, something about adjustments to scheduling and team flexibility. That was already a red flag. Meetings like this never meant anything good. Either someone was getting fired, or management had royally screwed up something and needed us to bear the burden of fixing it. The office gathered in the main conference room, murmurs of speculation filling the space as we waited for the manager to begin. Lisa sat a few seats away from me, looking completely at ease, as if she had already won some kind of battle. Her smugness was almost palpable, her expression practically daring me to complain now that HR had officially reviewed the situation and done nothing. I wasn't particularly worried. I had my vacation locked in, reinstated, and fully approved again. There wasn't much more she could do at this point, but I still kept my guard up. If nothing else, this meeting smelled like the kind of thing she would try to twist in her favor. The manager got straight to the point. Due to some unexpected project deadlines and shifting priorities from higher-ups, there were going to be changes to the vacation schedule. The company needed people to be flexible with their time off. There were too many overlapping absences in critical departments, and since the new workload required certain people to be present, some approved vacations would need to be adjusted. Lisa, sitting there with an expression of utter self-satisfaction, turned to me before the manager even finished speaking. She assumed this was about me. She assumed this meant I was finally about to be forced to reschedule my trip, that she had won after all. I could almost feel the anticipation radiating off of her. And then the manager dropped the real bombshell. Lisa's own time-off request, one she had been looking forward to for months, was now officially denied. The company needed her for an ongoing project that couldn't afford to have her gone during that particular period, so her previously approved vacation was revoked. Effective immediately. I didn't even have to say a word. The realization hit her all at once. At first, she just blinked, as if she hadn't actually heard the words correctly. Then came the protest, the immediate backlash, the disbelief. She had already made plans. She had already booked things. She had already arranged for everything to be in place. Surely, there had to be an exception for her. Surely, this wasn't happening to her. But it was. She had spent so much time trying to screw me over, trying to bend the rules to get what she wanted, that she hadn't even realized what she was setting in motion. By going behind my back, by tampering with the system, by challenging an already approved vacation request, she had created a precedent, one where management now felt empowered to undo prior approvals when it suited the company's needs. And now, she was the one paying for it. The satisfaction I felt in that moment was immeasurable. Of course, she tried to fight it. She pushed back. She pleaded her case. She said all the things I had said to her when she first asked me to give up my vacation. She talked about non-refundable bookings. She talked about plans that had been set in place for months. She talked about how it was unfair to change things last minute when she had done everything right. She said all the same things I had said. But now, suddenly, those arguments mattered. Except, they didn't. Management didn't budge. There was a project that needed coverage, and her absence was no longer an option. She was out of luck. I sat there, completely silent, just watching it all unfold. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to rub it in. I didn't even need to look at her. I knew she was spiraling. I knew she was realizing, in real time, that this was a problem she had created for herself. The cherry on top came later. HR reached out to me again, but this time, it wasn't a veiled accusation or a concerned discussion. This time, the HR rep actually apologized. Apparently, after reviewing the complaint against me, they had cross-checked the system logs. They saw exactly when my vacation request had been altered. They saw who had accessed it. And, unsurprisingly, it was tied directly back to Lisa. She had officially been caught. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It wasn't just a feeling. It was documented. HR gave her a formal warning for attempting to manipulate internal approvals, and while I doubted it would go on any kind of permanent record, it was enough to send a very clear message: she had lost. After that, the passive-aggressive behavior finally stopped. The cold shoulders, the smug glances, the whispered complaints about me being difficult or uncooperative all vanished. She barely spoke to me at all anymore, and when she did, it was only out of necessity. She wasn't friendly, but she wasn't hostile either. She had learned the hard way that she couldn't push her luck any further. And as for me, I went on my trip. I sat on a beach, sipping cocktails, feeling the warm sun on my skin, knowing that I had stood my ground and won. Meanwhile, Lisa was scrambling to rearrange her own plans, dealing with the exact same stress and frustration she had tried to force on me.